Alright y'all, we're going to replace the rear sway bar bushings on a 1995 Toyota Camry wagon. The bushings, if you hear a clunking in your car and you can feel it through the floorboard, it's likely going to be your bushings. In order to replace the bushings, one, you should replace them both at the same time. And in order to replace them, your car has to be up off the ground, both tires, so that you can get some slack in this sway bar. If you try to do one at a time with only one side jacked up, you're going to face extreme tension, and it's really hard to do. 12mm deep socket and a ratchet. It's only under 14 foot-pounds of torque, so it's not that tight. If y'all have a car that has a lot of rust under it, you might want to soak those bolts, spray them with some penetrating oil, and let it sit overnight before you take this bushing off the bracket. Right now we're just releasing the bracket. This one comes out at an angle. Again, y'all, this is a wagon and not a sedan. She's out. Okay, there's a little clip you have to disengage. See that little clip there? Remember when you're putting it back in, that it goes, that little clip when you're putting it back in, goes right in that hole. Right there, y'all. You take the bracket off, just like this. That's what she looks like. And you just separate that bushing, or you can move it. You either separate the bushing, like Sissy just did, sister, or you can move it up here and separate it. It's got a slit in it. So what I'm replacing it with is this character right here. This one is a Moog, and the model number on that Moog, or the part number, is K like King 90254. This is the side that was out, what we were seeing toward the outside of the car this way. But if you look on this side, you see that the rear of that sway bar right here is hitting there and enlarging that hole. That's not good, because that can allow that sway bar to travel, and that's the clunky noise you hear. You can see the difference in the two holes there. That one is rounded out, too large, and that one's not. That's the replacement part. Y'all have to figure out whether your sway bar is like a 14mm, 15mm, 16mm, and get the right part. But this is the part for this Camry wagon. These can, when they're new, make a bit of a squeaky noise. If that's going to bother you, as it wears in, it won't. If that's going to bother you, just put a little bit of silicone spray right on the inside of this with a Q-tip, so you don't overspray it before you put it on. I'm not going to, because that doesn't concern me. So I'm going to put this sway bar bushing on now. I'm going to widen it a little bit like this, because you got to get around that sway bar. Push her on, like that. So now, the reason I put the opening to the front, they don't designate, there are no directions, is that when this sway bar is hitting, we see from the wear pattern on this one, because it would actually be directional that way. That's what we saw on the outside before we removed it. You see that the sway bar is hitting mostly to the rear right there. So I don't want that opening to the rear. I want the opening to the front, the bracket to go over and hold that in place. Now, it's literally that easy, y'all. You put it on where it came off of. Then you got to remember that little tang right there goes in the hole right up there when you put it on. So you put the bracket on like that, you push it up, and you push that little tang into that hole. And then you just tighten the bolts. Now the back one is a little different for a wagon because it's off to the side a bit. So you've got to sort of jostle that around, wiggle it until you get it in. So y'all, I'm having to push the bracket over the top in order to get that bolt in, because it wants the actual hole to it is offset that way a little bit. We're going to tighten it up a little bit right now, and then we're going to tighten it. The torque spec on that is 14 foot-pounds. we're going to take our trusty torque wrench. I got that in an estate sale, actually for $5, not $10, because they didn't know if it worked. And it works like a charm, fortunately. But you don't always know, y'all. That's the risk we take buying all this used stuff that we really like. So now we're going to set this big bird to 14 foot-pounds. Hear that? Hear that clicking? That's 14 foot-pounds. Again, the only caveat is if you replace one, replace the other. The car has to be lifted. See that wheel over there, up off the ground? Got to be up so that it releases the tension on the sway bar. And that is how you change a rear sway bar bushing on a 1995 Toyota Camry wagon. I'm sure it's pretty similar to a sedan. Hope it helps. Happy DIYing.